Need help? Call our cybersecurity team and book a consultation with us today.
Hey, welcome everybody. My name's Alex Wehmeier. I'm a senior engineer here with LA Networks, and this is part of our continuing wireless webinar seminars. Today we're going to be talking about the differences to the end user and to your enterprise for Wi-Fi 6, 6E, and 7. The presenter will be Jan Greben, and first we'll tell you a little bit about LA Networks if this is your first time attending. Housekeeping items, this is probably not going to be more than probably 45 minutes to an hour. But you can type in any questions during the presentation into the Q&A box down in the bottom right corner. There should be an icon for Q&A, and we will moderate those and interject those and ask Jan your question. There will also be a session at the very end where we can ask questions if you have some overall questions. And we'll also have a little discussion at the very end about some of the LA Network specials that we have going for, especially around this Wi-Fi seminar series. So a little bit about LA Networks. We were founded back in '97. It's primarily an engineering-led competency that we have. We're led by engineers, and we take our projects very engineering focused and centric. Of those projects, we work in many different verticals: voice collaboration, data center server technologies in cloud, as well as our bread and butter, which has always been high-end route switch networking, as well as something that we're all very concerned with nowadays, which is security. And part of that is all the managed services that we can offer. If you don't have the bandwidth to do these projects or manage things internally, we can take care of that for you. We're definitely available to you in LA, the greater LA area, but we work in a national and a global footprint for many companies. And we're very happy to begin a relationship with you guys if you have any projects you need done. And once you use us, you'll be very happy probably to call us back for future engagements, because that's been our model, and that's how most of our customers enjoy working with us so much they keep calling us back. I think that is the intro. So once again, let me introduce you to Jan Greben, another senior wireless engineer here at LA Networks, and you will begin the Wi-Fi cage match. So I'm very interested to see who wins. Jan, take it away.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate that. Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well today. Like Alex said, my name is Jan Greben. I work here at LA Networks as a wireless engineer alongside Alex and Jackie and our other engineers. And like he said, today is our webinar on the Wi-Fi cage match, Wi-Fi 6 versus 6E and versus 7. This is the second webinar in our wireless series. Last month, Jackie and I did a Wi-Fi SINs webinar. Today's a cage match. I think next month, Jackie's doing a webinar on wireless troubleshooting. But so let's jump into our cage match. So before we begin, what do these Wi-Fi numbers mean? When I say Wi-Fi 6 or when I say Wi-Fi 7, what does that even mean? And honestly, all it is really is just how we call the different Wi-Fi generations. If you've been around wireless or Wi-Fi for a while, you probably remember, 802.11 AC, N, G. Some of you may even remember 802.11b and A. And what those are, those refer directly to the IEEE standards and amendments that define the different wireless technologies. And obviously, at some point, some marketing guy somewhere said, hey, wait a minute, these are confusing, right? All these numbers and letters, I don't know what that means. Can we just redo this and assign them in numerical order? And so they did just that. The Wi-Fi Alliance, which they're in charge of certifying different Wi-Fi products, they said, yeah, let's simplify this. and let's give it a naming convention. And they just started with Wi-Fi 0 from our original 802.11 and 97, and all the way through to what we have today, which is Wi-Fi 6 and 6E. They're available today, and Wi-Fi 7, which is coming, sometime in 2024. So today we're kind of taking a look at, hey, what's better for me? Do I jump in and get 6 or 6E right now? Do I wait for the latest and greatest that's coming out sometime in 2024? So we'll take a look at that. And I will say, just like Alex said, we'll be taking questions at the end, but also don't be afraid to submit a question via Q&A. I think you can raise your hand and we can unmute you if you want, but I do have a tendency to talk fast. So if I go over something too quickly or miss something, please don't hesitate to stop me and say, hey, Jan, I have a question. So our Wi-Fi cage match. Now let's go over the rules before we jump into each one of the Wi-Fi technologies. What are the rules? So what we're going to do, we're going to take a look at each one of Wi-Fi 6, 6E, and 7, and we're going to look at what are the advancements, what's new in each one, what's a special sauce, or why should I care about this specific Wi-Fi advancement. And then for each of those technologies or protocols, we're going to kind of break it down and bring it down to a practical level and say, hey, should I really even care about this? Is this relevant to me as an organization? And at the very end, we're going to kind of consider our options, which ones of them are relevant, which ones maybe weren't relevant, and we're going to decide a winner based on that. So our first entrant into the cage match is Wi-Fi 6. So Wi-Fi 6 brought a lot to the table. The first of that is OFDMA. And all this really is, it's a new multi-user technology. It's actually quite important to Wi-Fi 6. We'll cover this one first, probably in the greatest detail. Next is BSS coloring. This helps us with interference. We'll cover that one as well. Target wait time. That's a significant advancement in being able to improve power usage on our client devices. We'll jump into that one as well. And then there's also a 1K QAM and a downlink multi-user MIMO. These are actually, you see them mentioned a lot in data sheets and like marketing material, but we're actually not going to cover those on specific slides. We'll just cover them briefly here because they don't really, kind of deserve their own slides. So 1K QAM, all QAM is it's a modulation scheme, and the 1000 really just refers to how many bits we're able to stuff into that scheme. And so 1000, sounds like a lot, and honestly it is. It's 4 times what we do or what we did in Wi-Fi 5. But when you really get down to it, it's not very real life applicable. To be able to use such a high modulation scheme, you need basically a perfect environment for it with no radio frequency noise, nothing coming in. And in today's environment with a bunch of wireless devices, a bunch of other organizations using wireless, that's really going to come into play. And then downlink multi-MIMO. For those of you that were around in like 2015, 2016, there was a lot of hype about multi-user MIMO. It was really kind of the first multi-user technology to come into wireless, and a lot of us were very excited about it. Unfortunately, it didn't quite pan out in real life as some of us thought, but the fact that it was trying to get to multi-user MIMO is important. Unfortunately, for it, OFDMA just does multi-user MIMO a lot better than, OFDMA does multi-user a lot better than multi-user MIMO does. And so let's jump into that first one, and that's OFDMA. So let's start with a kind of a technical overview. What does OFDMA mean, or what does it stand for? And that acronym really just means orthogonal frequency divisional multiple access. You're probably standing there like, okay, what does that mean? That doesn't help a lot. And I agree that that just looks like a bunch of words jumbled together. What does that mean? And really, when you break it down, all OFDMA is we're taking our typical challenge. So think of your 20 megahertz wide channel, channel 1, channel 6, whatever it be. And we're really just taking a channel, we're breaking it down into a bunch of tiny little bitty easy channels. And OFDMA specifically, we break it down up to 256 different subcarriers. And then we can take those little mini channels and combine them to use how we want to. So think of, your 20 megahertz wide channel, and now maybe you break it down to just 2. And really what that helps us do, the use of it, why we want to do this splitting of a channel, is it allows us to talk to multiple users at the same time, right? That one AP can talk to multiple clients. And that's honestly huge, right? So wireless as a technology kind of has always been limited by it being a one-to-one communication, right? Wireless is a shared medium; it's half duplex, and it's always been one-to-one. And for the longest time, I think ever since we really started doing Wi-Fi, we've been trying to figure out, hey, how can we move this from single user to multi-user? And multi-user MIMO tried to tackle that challenge a little bit, and it did well in some places and fell short in other places. Namely, it was just hard to implement. Multi-user MIMO really depends on, it uses beamforming to try to create multiple conversations at the same time. And for that to really work well, you need your users to be very spread out. And so maybe in 2013, 2012, when it was being developed, we didn't have a lot of density in our wireless networks, and it made sense. Today, right, many of our wireless networks are incredibly dense, and we have lots and lots of clients coming into the network, and I feel like today more than ever, and it's only increasing. So multi-user MIMO no longer gets it done. And so here's where the IEEE said, okay, we need something better, and OFDMA comes in. And again, the purpose is let's get out of this one-to-one communication and let's get into a multi-user communication. And so the question is, should I care about this? And yes, a big resounding yes. I would say this is the biggest advancement in Wi-Fi 6 is OFDMA. In my opinion, honestly, this I think is the biggest jump in wireless technology since, if some of you guys remember, 802.11n, Wi-Fi 4 introduced multiple radios, and that was a huge thing for us back then. This is as big of a jump today, and probably the single biggest jump since then. So yes, absolutely, this is something we should care about. All right, next is BSS coloring. And so as I mentioned before, right, this is a way to kind of decrease channel interference. And first of all, what does BSS coloring mean? And a BSS really just stands for basic service set. And all that really is, it's an AP or it's radio and it's clients talking in the same frequency. And so, I mean, it's a simple, I'm sure you guys have seen, diagrams like this with the different channels. The BSS here, right, that channel 6 little circle, that's a BSS. That's that one AP talking on that frequency in channel 6 to its clients. Right? In today's day and age, we have access that are often dual band. They can talk 2.4 and they can talk 5 gigahertz. All that really means is that's two basic service sets in one access point, right? The one basic service set is talking on 2.4 gigahertz and the other one is talking on 5 gigahertz. But that's all really a BSS is. And all BSS coloring really is we take that, let's say channel 6, and we just add an additional differentiator to it. And we say, hey, channel 6 AP1, your basic service set, we're going to add the color red to it. And so your identifier is now AP1 on channel 6 with the color red. And AP2, you're going to be the color blue. And so I know you guys are both channel 6, but we're going to identify you guys differently. And the purpose of that really is to try to decrease the amount of co-channel interference. Now, co-channel interference, honestly, it's been an issue in wireless since probably, at the beginning of wireless. It's an ancient problem in Wi-Fi, as old as Wi-Fi itself, especially, in 2.4 gigahertz networks. It's inevitable. It's going to occur no matter what, as long as you have more than 3 access points, which almost every organization does. You're going to have co-channel interference. Even if you think you have the perfect design, our client devices are responsible for a lot of co-channel interference, and it'll introduce it anyway. And even in 5 gigahertz, once we hit 9 APs, 10 APs plus, we begin to run into co-channel interference as well. So for the most part, co-channel interference has been something that has been impossible for us to get away from. And honestly, in today's, even with perfect designs, we see it in 99% of networks. It's not a death knell, but it's something that we just kind of always had to deal with, and it's been a thorn in the side of wireless. And so what BSS coloring does is, hey, wait, maybe we can partially fix that, right? And instead of you're on channel 6 and I'm on channel 6, you're now color red, I'm color blue. We can try to ignore each other and not have to listen to each other. Now, you see the down thumb and the downside. Is there a catch? Yes, there's a catch, right? It's pretty hard to implement. So the chipset manufacturers, they're going to have their work cut out for them to figure that out. And I think optimal BSS coloring implementation, it's going to take some time. It's not easy to do. The idea, the potential behind it is great, but it's just going to be a little bit harder to do. So we're going to give it a maybe. Just a lot of potential, but like I said, I think with time, it'll really be something that'll be beneficial, but we got to see if the chipset manufacturers are able to get there, right? Just the same way in Wi-Fi 5, we were super excited about multi-user MIMO, and then it didn't come to pass. BSS coloring is one of those that has a lot of potential, but we got to see how it plays out first. So let me pause there. Any questions so far, guys? Is this making sense to you guys? We do have a question. It looks like, why is BSS coloring hard to implement? Good question. Honestly, the details are probably a little too in the weeds for this webinar to jump into, a little too technical. But to just try to summarize it shortly, and if that's not enough, you can ping me offline. But really, for BSS coloring to work, it relies on an AP's ability to dynamically choose which colors it should hear and which it should ignore, right? So if one color is red and one color is blue and they're both in channel 6, the red AP needs to be able to try to ignore the blue AP. And it needs to dynamically set that kind of a minimum signal level to say, hey, yeah, anything below this level, I'm going to try to ignore. But it needs to do it in real time, and it needs to do it dynamically. Because if you go in your controller today, your wireless controller, there's actually a setting it's called a signal detect setting, and you can set it yourself manually if you want to. But it's not a set and forget thing for BSS coloring to work. For BSS coloring to work, it has to be dynamically adjusted all the time, and that's the challenge for the chipset manufacturers, right? If you're a chip manufacturer, that's a hard logic to get into, and so that's why the potential is there if they're able to figure out how to accurately be able to adjust that on the fly, but that's definitely going to be hard. So I hope that answered the question. If it didn't, ping me offline, but that's basically why it's hard. Okay, any other questions before we jump into target wait time? Okay, moving on, this is our final category in Wi-Fi 6, and that's target wait time. Now, like we said, target wait time is all about saving power. Specifically, we talk power of our client devices. Now, the way it works is the AP, it really just analyzes traffic and then negotiates with the client a set time kind of before the client needs to talk again to the access point. Right? So it says, hey, client A, I see that we don't need to talk as often as we do. And how about we decide that you can go to sleep for 45 minutes. Well, let's agree that in 45 minutes, we both talk to each other and just see how we're doing. Do we still need to be connected to the SSID? How is your wireless health? Whatever. But between that time, you can be in power saving mode. And this is a significant jump from current times where we don't really have that ability to go to sleep for a long time. And with target wait time, theoretically, in a good environment, you could have your devices go to sleep for multiple hours in between communications. Now, you might say, okay, that's great. Why does that matter? And that really matters for organizations that are leveraging IoT. Those organizations that have large IoT deployments, this could be huge, right? Because if you have even several dozen, but if you have hundreds or thousands of IoT devices all over your facility, the power savings from target wait time can absolutely add up. Because in general, kind of by its nature, wireless is a very chatty technology. Lots of probes go out, lots of feelers sent out. APs are always talking to clients of, hey, are you still healthy? Do you still want to be connected? Do you want to go to this one? Hey, is this channel still in use? Or whatever it is, right? They're always kind of talking. And for devices like IoT devices that are maybe on battery or power matters, and they don't have a lot of data to send all the time, that's really just a lot of airtime that you're using up that you don't need to be using up. And so the idea behind target wait time is, hey, let's negotiate a time, right? We can clearly tell we don't need to be using all of this airtime or your power. We don't need to be talking every minute. Maybe we need to be talking every 12 minutes, every 7 minutes, every 45 minutes, whatever it is. And so let's negotiate that and do that instead. And so not only does that give you power savings, it can also free up airtime just because devices are less chatty. So for this one, we're going to give it a maybe. right? Definitely if you have a large IoT deployment, I would say this is a yes for you. If you're not really leveraging IoT today, target wait time will still bring some benefits to you, right? It'll clear up some airtime. Maybe it'll help your employees with their cell phones won't die as fast, but the benefits to you without IoT won't be that much, right? It's not something I would write home about, but it is some benefit anyway. Okay, so that's it for Wi-Fi 6. I know we just answered some questions. I think we're good now. Again, don't be afraid to interrupt me, but let's jump into Wi-Fi 6E. And so here you see just the one cloud, and you're like, that's it. Just the one thing, the 6 gigahertz band, and yes, that is the main benefit of 6E is 6 gigahertz, because when you break it down, all Wi-Fi 6E really is, it's the extension of Wi-Fi 6 into that 6 gigahertz band. And so if you noticed from that earlier slide when we talked about the different IEEE ratifications, Wi-Fi 6 is 802.11ax, and Wi-Fi 6E is also 802.11ax. So 6E really is a marketing term. The 6 gigahertz band was already designed for Wi-Fi 6 from the start by the IEEE, but they always knew that it would lag behind by a couple years while we got there, right, where the chip manufacturers worked, and really it was more about regulations. In the United States, the FCC getting allowance to be able to use a 6 gigahertz band. For us, we're in America, we're blessed. The FCC has basically given us the whole band, right? In Europe, they're still limited to about a third of it. And potentially regulations are coming in the future to be able to allow them to use more of that 6 gigahertz band. But really, if you see kind of here on this image, the 6 gigahertz band is massive, right? So it's about twice or a little bit more than twice the size of our current whole available space, right? So if you combine what we're using today, 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, 6 is more than double that. So it's a huge space. It'll give us a lot of space. And not just that, but it's also much emptier than 2.4 and 5. And when I say emptier, I mean that we share the 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz with a lot of other devices, right? So if you've heard before or elsewhere that in a 2.4 there's cordless phones are there, and microwaves are there, and a whole bunch of other devices in that same space with us, and so we end up having a lot of interference. And in the 6 gigahertz band, it's not just ours. We do share it. It's an unlicensed band, just like 2.4 and 5. But the reality is it's not very heavily used. And so not only do we have a lot more space, we also have a lot less noise, a lot less background noise that really improves the signal quality for us in this band. And so, for me, I live here in Southern California. For those of you guys that also live here, I'm going to put it in terms that are relatable to us. All right, here on the right we have the 405 highway on a particularly bad evening with a lot of traffic, very congested. And then on the left, I think this is the picture actually during COVID. Looks like the 101 during COVID when not many cars are driving. And if you ask me, hey, Jan, which one would you rather drive through to work? All day, every day, I would choose the nice, empty, wide road over the congested 405. And so all that to say is, should I care? Yes, absolutely. The 6 gigahertz band being opened up to Wi-Fi is going to be huge. It gives us a lot more channels. It's going to be easier to design, a lot less noise, so we can have higher quality signal, more throughput. So absolutely, this is something that we should care about. It's a big benefit to wireless. Okay, so that kind of wraps up 6 and 6E. Let me see if we have any questions. We do. Is Wi-Fi 6 backwards compatible? Great question, actually, and we do get asked this. And the answer is yes and no. Right, so unlike Wi-Fi 5 that operates only, or operated, when it came out, operates only in 5 gigahertz, Wi-Fi 6 operates in 2.4, it operates in 5, and obviously in 6 gigahertz as well with 6E. So in that sense, it is backwards compatible. Your legacy clients can connect to it since 2.4 is available in Wi-Fi 6. However, right, most of the features of Wi-Fi 6 and all the ones we talked about today, right, so OFDMA, target wait time, BSS coloring, these are all Wi-Fi 6 kind of exclusive features. They're not exclusive because of, the IEEE doesn't want to share. It requires a special kind of logic, right? A logic that older clients won't have. So you need to have a wireless Wi-Fi 6 capable client in order for OFDMA to work, right? For the moment, same thing with 6 gigahertz, right? Your legacy clients aren't going to be able to connect to 6 gigahertz. They're probably going to be still limited to 2.4. And I will say, I'll add too, actually, I think Alex Wehmeier, who you heard from earlier, I was talking about our wireless webinar series. Next is Jackie, but I think Alex is doing a webinar, I want to say in January, on 2.4, actually this topic specifically. He's doing a topic on 2.4 gigahertz and legacy clients, and really kind of discussing, is it time to jettison or get rid of our old legacy clients? So I think he'll dive into a lot more detail then. But great question though. And then one more, when will Wi-Fi 6E be available? It's actually already available today. All the major wireless manufacturers, so Cisco, Aruba, Meraki, Mist, whoever, they already are manufacturing and providing Wi-Fi 6 access points. They're available today. I would say if you need any help picking out the right models for you, don't be afraid to ping us and ask us for our opinion. We actually help a lot of clients with this kind of stuff, and we're not shy to share our opinion and tell you, hey, yeah, we think this access point would be a good fit for you, or maybe this one instead. Okay, I think that's it for questions. Let's jump into Wi-Fi 7. And so Wi-Fi 7, like 6, also has a lot of new things, right? And a lot of new technology advancements that it brings. And so what's new? So before we jump into that, actually, let me just mention real quick, right? Wi-Fi 7 is not here yet. So, right, the question I just answered earlier is Wi-Fi 6E here? Yes, it is. You can buy Wi-Fi 6E access points today. Wi-Fi 7, not true. Right now, it's still being ratified with the IEEE. They said they're probably about 18 months out, and that was 2 months ago. So, I don't know, that puts us probably in early to mid 2024, where Wi-Fi 7 will finally be ratified and, ready for the market. I will say you will start seeing some Wi-Fi 7 access points, especially consumer grade, honestly, probably next year, and maybe even some enterprise level at the end of next year. I will say buyer beware for those. My personal opinion is I would recommend waiting to buy Wi-Fi 7 access points until Wi-Fi 7 is actually ratified, just because those manufacturers, as they are releasing those access points, they don't know the final ratification and what the protocols will look like in the end. They're kind of guesstimating a little bit. Some of them, like when Cisco releases or Aruba releases an access point a little early, you can usually sometimes because they're on the Wi-Fi Alliance board themselves. But in general, I would say, unless you're in a hurry, wait for Wi-Fi 7 to be ratified if you want Wi-Fi 7 access points. Right. So that said, let's jump into these technologies. And so I will say, right, these technologies too, don't hate me, these change a little bit. Like I said, it's not ratified yet. This is what we think the Wi-Fi 7 ratification or amendment will look like. This might change a little bit, right? One of these might get cut, something might get added, or one of these might get changed a little bit. But okay, what's important in Wi-Fi 7? And we'll start with probably what's the biggest addition, and that's multi-channel and link operation. And really what that is, it gives our access points the ability to talk to clients on multiple frequency bands at the same time. So we'll jump into that for sure. That'll be the first one we'll cover in Wi-Fi 7. And then another one is multi-RU puncturing, or multi-resource unit puncturing. And it's a cool new way to deal with interference, right? We had BSS coloring in Wi-Fi 6 dealing with interference. This is another technology to try to deal with interference. We'll touch on that one as well. 320 megahertz wide channels. They're super wide, right? Right now our max is really 160, so these are even wider. We'll talk about that too a little bit. And then these other two, 4K QAM, it's cool. I think it's impressive the fact that we're able to, or will be able to modulate at such a high number, but it falls victim to the same thing we talked about, 1000 QAM in Wi-Fi 6. The higher modulation scheme, the higher requirement, the crazy requirement you have for a pristine radio frequency environment. So it's awesome we're able to do that. But if I'm going to be honest with you, right, it's the likelihood we're ever going to be able to see 4K QAM in a real life scenario actually being used and the data rates being used is pretty unlikely. So we're not really going to jump into that one, just like we didn't with Wi-Fi 6. And then the last one here is 16 by 16 MIMO. So if you're familiar with those numbers, like 16 by 16 or 8 by 8, 4 by 4, that really talks about how many radios we have in an access point. So today, even with Wi-Fi 6, our maximum is 8 by 8. And then Wi-Fi 7 is potentially introducing 16 by 16. I think this one's still a little questionable. And honestly, I wouldn't really care if this one makes it into the standard in the end or not. 8 by 8 today is already overkill. In 98% of scenarios, you're never going to be able to use 8 radios on one access point, just because most of our end user devices are still 2 by 2 or 3 by 3. I don't think I've really seen many laptops even that are still 4 by 4. I don't ever see a point where we're going to be using 8 by 8 on an end user device just because of the power draw required. It'll kill the battery. So this, with 16 by 16, it's the same thing, right? I don't ever see us in a scenario being able to use 16 radios, especially with the fact that, we talked about earlier, multi-user MIMO isn't really the multi-user technology we want to be using. We want to be using OFDMA anyway. So for you to use 16 radios, you need to be talking to one client, and that's rough, right? That's probably not going to happen. And also 16 by 16, that's going to be a huge power draw on the access point. So even now, with 8 by 8 access points, we're requiring 90 watts on some access points. I don't want to know how much PO we would require on a 16 by 16. But so this is one that, these are both no's. So should I care about 4K QAM or 16 by 16? They're cool, and it's cool to geek out. And when they first announced it, I was like, wow, this is awesome, the fact we're able to do this. But for a real life scenario, you're not going to run into it very often. Okay, so let's start with that first one we mentioned, and that's multi-channel and link operation. Now, right, so today, when we say with 6 gigahertz or 5 gigahertz, right, your client device connects to that one device or to that one access point on that channel, right? So when we said, hey, 6 gigahertz is opened up and with Wi-Fi 6E, that means you're talking on 6 gigahertz. What Wi-Fi 7 is potentially bringing, and looks like it will be bringing to market, is the ability to connect on both, 5 gigahertz and 6 gigahertz. And honestly, if you want it on 2.4 as well, so you can have one client connected to one access point on multiple different frequencies at the same time. And you can do this, for redundancy. You can have 2 completely redundant links. You can do this for link aggregation, where you're really doubling the bandwidth together. And so this is pretty cool, right? As just a wireless, nerd, when I first heard about this, I was like, wow, this is pretty cool, right? It has the potential to really kind of improve wireless communication, especially for mission critical applications and applications that have, very high latency and jitter sensitive applications. So that sounds cool, right? And 2 is better than 1, but should I care, right? As awesome as it sounds, should I care? And unfortunately, I put a maybe, right? And I say that only because today we honestly don't have a lot of applications that are really severely limited by a good wireless connection, right? As awesome as it sounds, it's like, what am I going to improve? How many different applications uses I'm going to improve by being able to do this? Because we do have applications, right, that are traditionally wired services that are very data sensitive, think servers. And it's like, would they benefit from this if they move to wireless? And it's like, yes, yeah, absolutely. Today we have lots of servers are connected with link aggregation ports to switches. So if we're able to do the same thing wirelessly, it's great. But I'd ask the question of, do we want to connect our servers wirelessly? And the answer to that question is probably no. So as often, or as awesome as that sounds, I don't see us using that for traditionally wired services. So then, when you think about what applications can I apply this to, I start thinking something like augmented reality or virtual reality, right? I think those applications will be able to really leverage multi-channel operation and be able to, benefit from the super low jitter and low latency and improved redundancy. But that's something we're going to have to see in the future, right? We don't really have a great use for augmented reality or virtual reality today. So I'm going to say a maybe. There's a potential this becomes, critical if those applications become critical to our businesses, but at the moment, I would say this is a cool thing, but not really critical for you. Okay, the next thing in Wi-Fi 7, and that's resource unit puncturing. And again, this is another way to deal with interference. We had BSS coloring, and Wi-Fi 7 introduces multi-RU puncturing. And the way it does that, right? So today, if you look at a channel, and let's say you're using a particular channel, and the access point experiences or notices some interference coming in that channel, for the most part, that access point or that client will actually choose to leave that channel entirely. Or sometimes they will say, hey, I'll just use a subset of this channel, like a small portion, whatever the interference is not blocking. But really, in most cases, it's just going to say, hey, I can't deal with this. I'm going to jump channels. And what puncturing does is we try to get around that by, instead of jumping off the channel entirely, we say, hey, I'm just only going to ignore the specific subcarriers that are experiencing that interference. So if you remember a little bit from the OFDMA conversation, we talked about subcarriers or splitting a channel into multiple resource units. This really kind of draws and builds on that and says, okay, well, if I'm going to do that, then I can choose to kind of take this interference and just limit it to these specific subcarriers and say, I will still continue to use the rest of this channel. This interference is only blocking 5% of this channel, so I'm going to continue to use a channel and still use the other 95% of it. And so this could be extremely useful in environments that experience a lot of interference. Right? Anything that has a lot of interference coming in from multiple areas, this could be really, really useful. But then if you think about it, you're like, okay, how often do we see that? Where do we see a practical scenario where we see this much interference? There's not that many, right? If you have that much interference, you have bigger issues going on that multi-RU puncturing will help with, but maybe you need to take a look at how you're designing your wireless in the first place. So will it improve wireless communication quality? Yeah, absolutely. I think even in places that don't have super high interference, it'll improve it, but it'll be a marginal improvement, an evolutionary improvement, not a humongous jump in better quality, right? So here we say probably not. It's definitely cool, but maybe just not as practical. Now, I didn't say no entirely to this one, mostly because there is potential for multi-RU puncturing to be really helpful in super high density multi-tenancy environments. So think like very crowded office spaces with lots of small suites that could be experiencing interference from their neighbors. And this is also true for residential, right? So think of an apartment or a condo with a bunch of apartments or condos crammed into a small building with all the different, tenants using their own Wi-Fi and interfering with each other. This could really be helpful for that. I see multi-RU puncturing as being a huge improvement for residential wireless, just maybe not so much enterprise wireless. So let me pause there. Do we have any questions? I think we're good. Okay, no questions. Let's jump into Wi-Fi 7 with a 320 megahertz channels and take a look at that. So I think I mentioned, right now, currently, our max in Wi-Fi 6 is 160 megahertz, and this is more than double that, right? And then we look, and today, for the most part, we really use 20 megahertz. So even though our maximum was 160, 90% of use cases, 95% of use cases, we're using 20 megahertz wide channels, and this is 16 times that. So you're like, wow, that's awesome. More must be better, right? It's so wide that this must be great, right? And unfortunately, the answer is no, right? So this is actually not that impactful. It's so not impactful, I didn't even create a new slide for it. I just copied in the same slide from the overview. And really the reason for that is the width of the channel itself. Yes, it's awesome. It's so wide and you can put a lot of data into it. But if you remember when we looked at the 5 gigahertz wide spectrum and the 6 gigahertz, 320 is so wide that if you were using a 5 gigahertz space, you would have space for only one channel. And that's it, just one channel. So if you have more than one access point, you're out of luck. And then, even with a 6 gigahertz space where we have all this space, and I talked about, hey, look, it's an open road with all these lanes. Even that is only 1200 megahertz wide, so you're going to get 3 channels. in that whole massive space of 6 gigahertz, you'll get 320 megahertz wide channels. And it's like, well, that's like going in backwards in time. That's the reason we left 2.4 gigahertz in the first place, is because we only had 3 channels, and we moved to 5 to get more channels. And now we're moving to 6 to get, a lot more channels. I don't want to go backwards and be limited to 3 channels again. So for the most part, I don't actually, not for the, I don't see this being really helpful in enterprise at all. If you have more than 3 access points, you're not going to use 320 megahertz wide channels. I will say this is actually another Wi-Fi 7 technology that'll be huge for residential, right? Because if you think of, when I say residential, this one's probably less helpful for apartments or condos, but much more helpful if you're living in a house. And so if you think you live in a house, you have 1, maybe 2 access points, and your kids are on Xbox and your wife is on Netflix, and you yourself are looking at cat videos or whatever. This will be huge because you're all using super high data sensitive applications that need a lot of data. You don't have a lot of access points. I would say I could see a future probably shortly after Wi-Fi 7 is released and we start getting Wi-Fi 7 clients. I could see a future to where 320 megahertz becomes the default channel width in residential applications, just because why not? We can now do it. We don't need the access point number, and now we can stuff a whole bunch of data down it. All right, so that really kind of wraps it up. That's the last one for Wi-Fi 7. So I want to move on to the winner, right? So we've looked at Wi-Fi 6. We've looked at Wi-Fi 6E. We looked at Wi-Fi 7. Just want to make sure we have no questions before we I jump in and we decide the winner. Okay, drum roll, please. Our winner from the cage match is Wi-Fi 6E. And I'm sure you're not surprised. 7 is cool. There are a lot of cool things in it. But like I said, Wi-Fi 6 really it's a generational jump. It's the biggest jump, honestly, in wireless technology we've had since Wi-Fi 4 in 2008. And all Wi-Fi 6E is just Wi-Fi 6 plus the 6 gigahertz spectrum, really just the best of both worlds. We get a much better multi-user functionality. We have the whole 6 gigahertz band to play with. And so it's a good fit, right? I would say Wi-Fi 7 is, excuse me, is awesome. I'm definitely excited for it. It's going to be very cool, but it's not one of those things that's like worth waiting for, right? It's going to be an improvement, but it'll be a slight evolutionary improvement, whereas Wi-Fi 6 and Wi-Fi 6E really are revolutionary. They change how we do Wi-Fi today. So let's jump into our Q&A. I know we've answered quite a few of Q&A questions already, but did we have any additional questions? Do you guys disagree with my decision to, for 6E to win? Did you want 6 to win? Did you want Wi-Fi 7 to win? Don't be afraid to Q&A. We do have a question here. We're looking at upgrading our wireless late next year. Is that should I just hold out and wait for Wi-Fi 7? I would say it depends. I know, so Wi-Fi 6E is available today, but the advice I would give, I don't know if you guys know about the state of the industry and the manufacturing industry with chipsets specifically, but right now we have a huge shortage on chips, right? And this goes beyond just networking. This is true for if you want to buy a car, if you want to buy a smart fridge, a smart TV, whatever. We don't have enough chips right now, and the manufacturers are trying to keep up with demand, but the demand is significant. So right now, if you're to buy, if you're looking at late next year, I think you said, yeah, late next year for a wireless upgrade, I would say, buy 6E today, because there's a chance it doesn't arrive. The delivery times and the long lead times, it might take a while to arrive. So don't put it off, right? If Wi-Fi 7 will have the same issue, right? So the reason Wi-Fi 6 is an issue and Wi-Fi 5 wasn't is because the bigger and better access points get, the more chips they need. So a Wi-Fi 6 access point needs way more chips than a Wi-Fi 5 did, and a Wi-Fi 7 will need more chipsets than a Wi-Fi 6. And so when Wi-Fi 7 comes out, this problem isn't going to get fixed itself. If you're looking at an upgrade for late next year, I would say definitely get 6E now, because if you're going to wait until 7, and let's say we wait a year and a half until it comes out, and then another year, however long it's going to be for the equipment to arrive, you're looking at 2025 for an upgrade. So definitely, I would say if you're looking for some time within the next 18 months, I would say get in Wi-Fi 6E and get in line, because a lot of other people are realizing this. They're looking at Wi-Fi 7. They're like, hey, do I wait or do I go now? And a lot of people are deciding, I want to go now and get in line and wait for my equipment to arrive. So another question was, does Wi-Fi 6E require a different wireless design than normal? That's a fantastic question. And for the most part, I would, well, this is another one where I would say yes and no. So as far as the physical characteristics of 6 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz, they're so close together that for the most part, a design for 5 will most likely work for 6. But that really begins to differ when you start talking about density. With Wi-Fi 6E, right, with a 6 gigahertz band, since you have so much more channel use, you can really start getting super creative on how you place access points, where you place access points, and not be worried about interference at all. We also are able to start moving away from 20 megahertz wide channels. I know we've been talking about moving to 40 megahertz or 80 megahertz since 2015, but with a 6 gigahertz band with so much space available, we really are able to start moving to those channels. And so for that reason, I would say it depends. If you're getting Wi-Fi 6E, I would try to design with 6E in mind. Get a design done that actually fits your needs specifically, however dense you want it, right? There's the capacity versus coverage conversation. It's actually something we covered on our last webinar. But yeah, I would try to design with 6E in mind. If you need help with that, don't hesitate to ask. We can definitely provide some advice. We have another question. We're considering I don't know if it's the same person or not, but somebody's considering a wireless upgrade for next year and are not sure about controller or controller-less wireless. What's your recommendation? That's actually a fantastic question. I love that topic. I think we're going to try to do that topic in a webinar, I don't know, early next year, maybe March-ish or sometime. But it's a question that requires a nuanced response. It's another one of those, it depends, right? So the reason you asked that, I'm sure, is, as we've all seen, Meraki has grown significantly in the wireless space. Aruba has as well. So neither one of those are actually truly, so you ask controller or controller-less. Neither one of those are really truly controller-less. They all use a controller. The question really is, where does the controller live? Right, so if we think Meraki, the controller really lives in a cloud. It's in its Meraki dashboard. It's still controlling the access points, but it's far away. It's not on-prem. You're not worried about hardware. You're not really worried about management. And so deciding, hey, do I want a controller that is either on-prem, either physical, or I put on a virtual machine, or is it a controller that lives in Aruba's cloud or Meraki's cloud? It depends, right? So the nice thing about controller-less is the ease of use. If you've ever used Meraki, you know it. It's incredibly easy to install. The dashboard is very appealing. It's cool to look at, but there's a downside, right? And the downside is it doesn't have the same granularity that a controller will have. So if you're the kind of guy that really wants to get in the weeds, you want to be able to control your wireless, you want to be able to see what's going on and tweak gadgets and things here and there, I would say go controller. If you also have a very large site with a lot of access points, I would say go controller. But otherwise, if you don't need cloud controller or cloud controller-less with Meraki or Aruba, absolutely makes sense. We have a question here. See, I don't know if Alex answered it. If you have IoT devices connected to 2.4, does that impact the performance of clients connecting at 6 gigahertz? No, for the most part, right? So because our access points, they're dual band or now tri-band. If you have 2.4, 5, and 6, really you can kind of think about that 3 access points in one. So that 6 gigahertz band radio on that access point is almost like one access point. The 2.4 is almost like a whole different access point. So when we talk about airtime, the biggest limitation in wireless is having to share airtime and having to wait for slow clients. So for the most part, the answer is no in terms of, those 2.4 clients are on 2.4 And the Wi-Fi 6 gigahertz radio is its own radio, its own access point. That's its own basic service set. So those are two separate basic service sets. But I will say for the most part, because there's still some limitation, right? Just the processing power on the access point itself, there is a limit to that, right? So our access points are very, we talked about all the chipsets and how we have to wait on these. There is some limitation just because if it's doing a lot of talking in Wi-Fi or 2.4 gigahertz space, there will be some limitation on the 6 gigahertz space, but I would say not a lot, probably not enough for you to really worry about or lose much sleep about. I see Tad, yes, Aruba. Glad you, yep, agreed, 100%. And then we have one more. Can I get a recording of this webinar? Yes, absolutely. So we do share out the recordings of the webinar. We also do post the recordings on our YouTube channel, and we share them out. I think we have one of our slides at the very end that kind of shares about that, where you can find. And I think you'll get the slide deck as well. Alex, correct me if I'm wrong there. But yes, you'll definitely be able to see a recording. Okay, I think that's all the questions I see. Alex, was there anything I missed maybe?
I think that was a handful there. Looking, no, there are no other questions. I think we're good. Thank you for delving into those. I guess the takeaway that Wi-Fi 7 is still a few years away for the access points, and then the client devices usually lag from that as well. So who knows when your first Android and iPhone devices will have it. So
Wi-Fi 6 came out
but in terms
years ago. So I was going to say we're just now, getting to a client density with it. So yeah, that's a great point. If Wi-Fi 7 comes out in 2024, it'll be 2026, 2027 until end user devices start using it.
Right. So we have some long runway before that lands. But yeah, it sounds like 6E is definitely exciting. And again, yeah, still want to see client devices using it. My laptop sure as heck won't. But getting that infrastructure in place, this is good. It sounds like we've made a kind of a decision as a community that 6E is definitely well worth it. So if anybody needs to upgrade, that should be our target for at least the next 3 years. No more questions? Okay, so in terms of wrapping up what Jan has shown us, we do have some takeaways for you guys. I think we have a slide that maybe shows some of the specials that we have. LA Networks, like we said, we do many different verticals, but on the Wi-Fi side, we can definitely help you with design, and every good design starts with a survey. So if you haven't had somebody do a Wi-Fi survey, go around with the floor plan and measure radio frequency propagation and stuff, that would be something we could do for you. If you already do have an installation and you're tearing your hair out because certain things don't work, and different users are calling up saying their Wi-Fi is intermittently dropping or something, which we all have that, right? We can help with going in and doing an assessment of your current infrastructure and looking at your controller and how the access points and clients are functioning. And if you just throw in the towel and don't want to even have to deal with it, we can definitely do some managed services around Wi-Fi and take over that load of managing everything regarding your wireless. So if you are interested in any of those services, let us know. We also have a special wireless, what we're calling health check package, which will give you guys some a combination of the wireless assessment and survey for, I think we cap out at about 4,000 square feet for this assessment, but it's a very reduced price. So definitely try us out for that if you are having some problems and want somebody to come in and look at it. And I think as Jan alluded to, we had, this is part of a series, and if you want to go back and look at them, there's our YouTube link. You can search for LA Networks, and you'll find a whole complement of wireless and other networking related videos. Our next one will be December 15th on wireless troubleshooting basics, and that's going to be really exciting. So if you are managing this stuff and don't want to outsource the management to somebody else, definitely join us for that one. It'll get you really a good checklist of what to do when you know, a user or somebody reports an error or a wireless problem. How do you go about really isolating the problem? And then in January, we'll be talking about something that it's kind of it's a little bit contentious about whether or not we can just turn off the 2.4 legacy kind of wireless. We're going to call it legacy. Now that we have 6 gigahertz, definitely we have more options. But if you're still running a 2.4 and 5 gigahertz mixed environment, you really still need 2.4. And should you still allow users to dip their toe into it? Because usually when they do, you end up with more trouble than it's worth, or at least that's the summary of that discussion. So please join us for that. And I think that wraps it up. Thank you all for attending. And again, thanks, Jan, for this presentation. And look on our YouTube collection of webinars and join us again next month. Thank you all.
Need help? Call our cybersecurity team and book a consultation with us today.